Hello everyone and welcome to this episode, the mental health one of the Women Talking About Learning podcast. I'm Andrew Jacobs. This episode is being released to coincide with World Mental Health Day on the 10th of October. We feel this is an essential subject to talk about since there's still a stigma associated with mental health issues. It's getting better, but we still have a long way to go. So, with this in mind, we have two fantastic guests to talk about it. Our first guest is Erica Farmer. Erica has over 20 years of learning development experience with some of the UK's best known brands, such as LV, British Gas, Specsavers and Virgin. Erica's area of specialism is the future of work and skills, digital learning and challenging the quality of our education systems. Erica also shares lived experience with mental health and neurodivergence. Our next guest is Rachel Grant. Rachel is currently working as the project manager for online learning at the Mental Health Foundation, one of the UK's leading mental health charities, where she creates digital courses to empower, educate and inspire the nation to lead more mentally healthy lives. Rachel has experience in supporting people with a range of mental health needs and is passionate about breaking down the taboo that exists around mental health. We recorded this in August 2023. This is Women Talking About Learning. This is Erica and Rachel talking about mental health.
Hi Erica, how are you?
I'm all right, thanks, Rachel. How's things with you?
Yeah, very well, thank you. Just coming off the back of the long bank holiday weekend over here, aren't we? So yeah, nice and rested, refreshed, ready to get back to work.
I wish I could say the same. I was really hoping for some vitamin D, some sunshine, and just like we've had a bit of a washout summer, haven't we? But yeah, I enjoy time away, but I find like I get in my head a little bit sometimes. I don't know about you, but yeah, sometimes I want to get back to work, which is a bit of a weird thing to say, really, but it gives me the structure that I need for the day. So
no, I totally understand that. I think for a lot of people, even me, when I have too much time off, actually I get quite bored. I kind of need something to be focusing on, something to be doing. So yeah, pleased to come back to work.
yeah, absolutely. I think do you have kids? Do you live on your own? Do you?
No kids. I live on my own. Well, I live with my landlady. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So I think it's a bit of a different experience for people who do have kids. They're like, oh my goodness, like
I know, because
not so much of a relaxing weekend.
Yeah, I was thinking that as we were talking about it. I was thinking we both must not have kids or live on our own, because I know my friends who've got kids who are like, oh my god, what are you talking about, having too much time? It's funny, like they're like, oh, I wish I could have a day to myself, you know.
And it's the summer holidays as well, isn't it? So we're coming to the tail end of that, and people are kind of at their wits' end with childcare and everything. So I think ready for the kids to go back to school as well.
Yeah. I think stress comes in many different guises, and I can imagine trying to entertain 2 or 3 kids with a washout summer is probably highly stressful in itself. So
absolutely. Yeah, I just did a bit of babysitting of my niece, and that was quite enough
nice.
for me.
Yeah, you can give her back at the end of the day,
exactly.
Yeah.
So Erica, tell me a bit about yourself then.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm the business director for Quantum Rise. So I have been out of corporate employment now for about 3 or 4 years. So I work with a business partner, and we work with corporate learning and development clients. And do you know what? The stresses and strain, that sounds amazing, like working for yourself and like not having a boss and all that kind of stuff, and getting out of corporate, which was definitely like a lot of my motivation. But I guess, what comes with that are different challenges, isn't it? Like making sure you can pay your mortgage every month because nobody else isn't going to do it if you don't do it, and or those kind of things. And I guess like this plays into the mental health subject that we're here really talking about today. And it just, whenever I think about mental health, I just think we've all got mental health, but everyone's got their own challenges themselves, haven't they? Whether it's the kids or the job or the business or whatever it might be. And I think sometimes you're just born with more challenges in that space. I feel really ungrateful sometimes because I do work for myself, and then we have great clients. I've got a great business partner. But like going back to your point about the bank holiday weekend, like Sunday I just felt really down, and I was just like really in my own head, and And I was like, God, I've like got so much to be grateful for. Why am I feeling just so generally down and anxious? But that's kind of mental health challenges in itself, isn't it? There's no logical reasoning for it. It's just our perception of the world and how we feel about things from moment to moment. So
yeah, absolutely. And you know what? I think it's really common for people to kind of think that they don't have the right to feel rubbish. And it's kind of like, oh, well, someone else has got it worse than me. Or, maybe I'm, stressed about paying my mortgage, but hey, there's other people who don't have a mortgage because they're not on the property ladder. Or there's people who are homeless. So who am I to complain? But I mean, the point is like we all have our own experience with mental health, like you say, and our feelings are valid. So yeah, like don't feel like you have to invalidate those feelings.
It's a good point.
It's hard. And I think having a boss can be really challenging. Being a boss is really challenging.
I think that's a really good point, because we always compare ourselves to other people, don't we? And I always think, Erica, what have you got to be down in the dumps at? And it's more than being down in the dumps. We know that, but like, what have you, or like, I'll be catastrophizing about a silly little thing like a client paying an invoice late. But in my head, I've suddenly gone to like, oh my God, the business is gonna fold because I haven't got the cash flow coming in, and I'm not gonna pay my mortgage next month. Do you know what I mean? It just becomes this massive big thing, and you're like, before you know it, you've just invented this whole what if reality in your head. And if anybody listening to this has anxiety, you know what that kind of tight chest, barely kind of breathe, heart palpitation like feels like. I'm sure we've all had it at some point. And I just still struggle with the whole like validating your feelings and not feeling that it's like, trying to put them to one side because you should be grateful and you are better off than some people and all that. So it's an interesting point that you've got on it.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting as well that you're talking about kind of like the physical bodily responses to anxiety and to stress, because our mental health does affect our physical health and vice versa in a massive way. You can't really separate the two. And I'm the same. Like I really struggle with my anxiety. And I have all my life really since I was like a teenager. And it started off with, regular sort of panic attacks and so on. But in recent years, I've started to feel like symptoms that I haven't felt before, like with like muscle tension, and genuine pain in my body when I'm really stressed out. And I think it's hard. I mean, obviously, we're talking about women in learning, but especially as a woman, like when you go to like your healthcare practitioner and you say I'm experiencing pain, it's quite hard to be taken seriously sometimes when you say that sort of thing. And it's well, that's a bit subjective, and do you think you have a low pain threshold and all of this? But it's definitely true that there's the mind affects the body and vice versa.
So true. It's the hidden kind of impairments, isn't it? It's the it's I mean, it took me quite a lot, like it does for anybody with these kind of chronic illness conditions. It took me, I think, maybe 5 or 6 years to get my fibromyalgia diagnosis, because people were like, oh, it's growing pains, oh, it's stress, oh, it's this, oh, it's that, it's like da 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 da, have some talking therapy, oh, kind of, oh, it was your parents' divorce, and da da da. And what, it probably was all of those things all together. But eventually I was lucky enough, I had private healthcare and an employer, and I just like referred myself to a rheumatologist, and she like, again, it's not really well recommended in this country, but in America, things like ME, CFS, fibromyalgia have certain tests and pain points and symptom checkers. And she diagnosed me with fibro. And I was like, so does that connect to the sleeplessness and the anxiety and the depression? And she was like, tick, 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 tick. So sometimes we talk about mental health, but to your point, it could be musculoskeletal. I used to hold my stress in my jaw and my head and have massive stress headaches, like if I was stressed at work, or that kind of fear of your heart dropping into your stomach when you see your boss's name come up on the mobile and things like that. I mean, luckily I don't have that stuff now, but I have to a degree transferred it onto other things, and like fibromyalgia doesn't just go away either. So it's just,
absolutely.
I think people take it for granted and they go on this hamster wheel, don't they, of just day to day to day to day, and actually don't sit back and realize what's really going on for me sometimes.
It's interesting, like you talking about your experience with getting a diagnosis. I think it might be interesting to talk about that, like when it comes to mental health as well. Like, how do you feel about getting a diagnosis for your mental health? Do you think that's a helpful thing? Do you think that actually labels you and, can be a bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy? I don't know, like what are your thoughts on getting a diagnosis?
It's generational. I think it's probably a lot more accepted now. I don't know what you think. I think it's more accepted now compared to what it was. I think people are a lot more open, whether that's neurodivergent, if you're kind of autistic, ADHD, anything on that kind of level, or whether, a lot of people, it feels like people are more open and willing to share their experiences with things like an anxiety attack and a panic attack. And whereas when my mum was my age, and I've had depression and anxiety in the family, my nan had it, my mum had it, I've got it. It was almost a bit taboo, wasn't it? So I think there's been massive changes, whether that's diagnosis through neurodivergence or diagnosis through mental health or a chronic condition. I think people are just, for whatever reason, whether that's the pandemic and the shift of like work-life balance or whatever's happened there, I do find most people are okay to talk about that in general, of probably my age and below, maybe a bit older than me. So I'm like 42. So kind of maybe mid-40s and below, it feels like people are a bit more comfortable, that millennial generation. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I don't actually have a personal opinion about getting a diagnosis for your mental health. I just think it's so up to the individual. Like, some people do find it really helpful, and actually once they've got a name for it, everything starts to click, and then you understand yourself better and you understand what you're going through better, and you've kind of developed this like common language to talk to other people about what you're going through, and you can use a bit of a shorthand, and people understand you a lot better. And I think also, in the workplace, if you want to get support, sometimes it can be really beneficial to have that diagnosis where you can like really objectively say, look, this is what I'm dealing with and I need a bit of help. And you can get, those reasonable adjustments and everything. But on the other hand, for some people it is really detrimental, and having like a diagnosis of depression or anxiety or whatever it may be could actually lead to them feeling really stigmatized and really isolated and just labeled, and people might start to see them differently, treat them differently. So it's a really tough choice you have to make, I think, about whether or not you really want to get a diagnosis, and there is no right or wrong. It really, you've just got to kind of weigh it up for yourself, I think.
And I guess how helpful your GP is, if you've got a really good, I've got a great GP and she's really super helpful, but like I used to have another GP and he was terrible, and he just blamed, he was that typical GP you could go in with a broken leg, and he would say it's because you're overweight. Right. Everything was to do with your weight. And you hear women talk about that quite a lot. Like, everything is blamed on their weight, whether it's menopause or depression or stress or this or that, So I think part of it is the quality of support you get from medical practitioners, and helping you to feel that it's okay to, and that you, like you said, being heard and treated, and exactly, like people fixating on things like smoking, you just need to give up smoking. I'm not going to have the conversation about anything else until you give up smoking. It's like the weight conversation. So yeah, I've been lucky, and I guess as part of that, because of that, I'm happy asking. Like, I go on and off things like sertraline, which is an antidepressant, and it's just a low dose. It just keeps the serotonin going around my brain a little bit before my body absorbs it. That's all it does, but it just keeps me lighter and happier for longer. And actually, just a small adjustment like that just makes like a huge difference to some people. And one thing I have noticed recently, so thinking about kind of ADHD diagnosis and stuff like that. So I was diagnosed as hyperactive when I was 6. This was before things like ADD and ADHD were really recognised. And
right.
I'm thinking about going for like a proper formal diagnosis now as an adult. But even when you speak to life insurance companies or critical illness insurance companies, as soon as they start asking you questions about your illness, it's very much kind of, have you seen a psychologist? And it all starts to go down like this deep, dark place, and yeah.
And you know what? I think it's interesting when people try to sort of diagnose you and you get all this sort of like investigation going on. And actually, you mentioned it earlier when you were talking about, you know, speaking to a GP and they're saying, "Oh, is it your parents? Did you say your parents divorced, or is it your depression? Is it this? Is it that?" And the truth is, like, we can't really pinpoint one single factor that influences our mental health, right? It's a total mixture of partly our biology, partly our environment, partly, our experiences, our life experiences. And I've been like thinking quite a lot recently about diet and mental health. And I read something that really resonated with me, and it was saying like, your diet isn't just what you eat. We're talking about your diet in terms of like the content you consume as well. Like, what are you watching? What are you watching on TV? Like, what news channels are you going to? Like, you know, what are you digesting each day? What's going in? And actually, like, I noticed there was a point in time where I was binge watching Orange is the New Black, which is obviously like a really great show, but also like pretty hard hitting and like covers some really like emotional topics. And I really like started to go into a bit of a low place during that time. And like that was just one of the things that I realized actually like what I'm what I'm taking in on a daily basis is not necessarily like helping me to be in a positive place. But yeah, it's interesting. Like, there's just so many different factors that influence us, and some can be really tiny, and some can be really big.
Yeah, and like, what strategies do we have in place? So when we start to realise, like, I'm watching too much content, or I'm doom scrolling on my phone, or I'm starting to get that tight feeling across my chest, you know, how do we recognise it in ourselves, or help others to recognize it in us, to start saying, like your friends or your partner, your family, parents, "Oh, I'm starting to see your behavior shift a little bit. Are you okay?" Because sometimes just a question like that is really powerful, isn't it? Like if someone's acting slightly differently, you know.
Yeah, and I think that's the key as well. It's about noticing when someone's acting a bit differently to their usual self. So you know, for someone, you might say, "Oh, like this person's acting." I mean, so let's take it back to the workplace. If there's someone at work who's actually being really quiet and not very talkative and not joining in discussions, you know, is that a cause for concern? Maybe, but it depends. Maybe that's their personality. Maybe they're always like that, in which case that's fine, you know, if they're doing their work and it's still a valued member of the team. But if someone's usually like really outgoing, super gregarious, like social sec, and suddenly they come in and they're being really quiet and a bit withdrawn and not really participating, then yeah, that might be a sign that, you know, maybe something's going on and you need to have a bit of a check-in with them.
And it's not about diagnosing that for them, is it? It's just asking the question, "Are you okay? Is there anything I can do? You know, do you need any support?"
Yeah, absolutely. And that's something that I've been looking at in my work. So I work for the Mental Health Foundation on our online learning programs. And we've just put out a course on mental health and well-being in the modern workplace. And we've got like a module that's all about that. It's all about, you know, noticing changes in your colleagues and noticing and acting. And I also think what's really powerful about that is that, you know, it's not just your manager who can do that. Anyone can do that, you know, whether they're in your team, not in your team, if there's someone you just see in like the break room, or, you know, anyone at work has that ability and has that power, has that opportunity to notice if something's you know, different, and if you might need a little bit of support.
And like when you're in the moment, whether you're wrapped up in work or whether you've got stuff going on outside of work, or, you know, just it's a bit cliche, but sometimes it does feel like there's 42 different tabs open in your own head, doesn't there? And you're trying to juggle everything. I don't know about you, but like when I'm pushing it too far, I don't recognize that. But my business partner Haley will say to me, "Are you okay? You look tired. You're talking about this in a certain way. You've used a bit more of this language. What's going on? Have you taken some time off?" And actually, just by her saying, "Erica, stop," that makes me kind of go, "Oh, am I okay? Or is it that I've got 42 tabs open in my head and that's all right because that's how I deal with stuff? Or have I got two tabs open and there's something else going on for me that I need to address, go back onto medication, take some time out, have a holiday, chill out for a bit, spend some time with friends, whatever that might be. So that kind of buddy system kind of, I find, really helps when it comes to mental health as well.
Yeah. It sounds like your business partner is like a really huge support to you. And I'm sure it goes, it's vice versa. You do the same for her, and you're really lucky that you've got that relationship and that person that you can sort of lean on and support each other in the workplace. I know you said that, you run your own business essentially. Is that how it is? It's like a team of two?
So and because of that, you are thinking about so many different things at the same time, and it's again cliche, kind of like spinning those plates and prioritizing getting stuff delivered sometimes over your own well-being, because you have spent too much time in front of screens, or like too much time with work, or you haven't got up and gone for a wee for 2 hours, something as silly as that. But you get so engrossed with stuff sometimes that it's so easy just to park any feelings. I remember working with a business psychologist when I was at LV, and just like a simple physical check-in and check-out makes you sit back and kind of go, actually, how am I feeling? How am I emotionally feeling? How am I physically feeling? Because sometimes you just don't even recognize that stuff because you're on that hamster wheel again and just getting on with stuff. Couple that with a neurodivergence or other things you got going on, you can see how people burn themselves out quite quickly, can't you?
Yeah. I think that's quite it's quite a nice thing that people do when we have meetings at work, for example. At the beginning of each meeting, we have like a bit of a check-in and a check-out. Sometimes it's really silly, or sometimes it's just kind of like on a scale of 1 to 10, where are you today? And I think that's really powerful. It doesn't have to be a whole conversation, or you don't have to book in, let's talk about your well-being. Send someone like an invite in their calendar. It can just be a natural part of every conversation. But I do like doing that, actually. Like, I know that some people find it a bit cheesy or a little bit contrived, but I think the point is that it just makes it routine to talk about your mental health, on a daily basis, and that's so healthy.
Whatever that vehicle is that allows you to surface it, like you said, check in, check out, another little practical exercise, just somebody asking you that question, whatever it might be. It's just having that lever, isn't it, to have that conversation. And like, I'm super extrovert, if you haven't guessed already, so I do let it all hang out, and I'm actually really super grateful for that, because I feel better after I've let it all hang out. It means I've talked about it and I've got it out. And if I'm on my own, I spend too much time in my own head, and then that's when you end up kind of catastrophizing and feeling anxious, and you invent this world in your head. And I think a lot of people are maybe too scared to let it all hang out and talk about it, or not having that person they can talk about it with, or don't know how to talk about it. So a course and some instruction and stuff like that is valuable, because it gives people just a bit of a framework and a structure to use. And you don't have to be able to articulate it in the right way or use the right words. That's not the point. The point sometimes is just sharing how you're feeling, isn't it? And like being okay with that as well.
Yeah. And it's interesting as well, because it brings up that question of, how much do you share at work? A lot of people say these days we should be able to bring our whole self to work, and like, what does that really mean? And yes, it's really good to be vulnerable, but there's sharing. Where's that line between sharing and oversharing? Like, where's that boundary in the workplace?
Yeah, and if we all had the ultimate manager that we worked for, who totally kind of subscribed to vulnerability and compassionate leadership and all that great stuff, then yeah, I'm sure it would be great. I remember a manager saying to me once, Erica, you don't have to tell everybody how you're feeling all the time. And she probably had a point. But part of me was like, that's your problem. That's not my problem. That's you being uncomfortable about talking about things about the human condition, about being people, right? Like you said, whole self. Some people are really uncomfortable with that.
And I think it takes, obviously now, you are in like a leadership position, and I think it does take, leaders role modeling that authenticity and that openness for people to actually feel comfortable enough to open up. Because, it's all about the context, isn't it? Maybe I, as an individual, am usually quite open about my mental health and I'm happy to share. But if I go to a workplace which doesn't feel like, a very psychologically safe place to be myself and have that conversation, then, I'm going to keep it to myself. And actually that might cause unnecessary further suffering, because like you said, sometimes just getting it off your chest or just being heard, just being able to express yourself can really help. Lift your mood or stop you from spiraling or catastrophizing or, going down a certain road in your mind.
Yeah. And it does kind of open up the wider conversation about, women in the workplace, whether that's menopause, whether that's kind of hormones, whether that's allyship with men, which is obviously an interesting quandary at the moment. One, we've got what's going on with Spanish football at the moment, and consent, and did he kiss her? Did she say yes? Did he? It's like there's a can of worms here. It's not just mental health, although mental health is affected by how women are treated in general, and when you put a lens over it, like hormones or menopause or mental health, that's where you can almost start to hear the eyes roll a little bit from some people, isn't it? Oh, it's a woman's thing. She's a woman. Why would she need to take time off because she's got period pains? You hear all of this stuff all the time, but all of this plays into how we see ourselves and how we feel about ourselves, which effectively is our mental health, isn't it? Like how we deal with that and what's going on with our brain chemistry. And, so there's so many more pressures.
I think it's hard for women in the workplace to expose themselves, be vulnerable, open up sometimes, because they're trying to fight against those stereotypes that women are overly emotional and, all of those kind of things. And they want to be taken seriously. They want to be seen as leaders that they are. So sometimes women don't open up when it would actually be really beneficial to them. But actually we see that with men, I think maybe even more. Men find it really hard to talk about their mental health in the workplace. And in general, I think something like a third of the referrals to talking therapies are for men and 2/3 are for women. So that's quite a big indicator that, women are more comfortable, more open to talking about their mental health. And I think for men, there is still that kind of like, those gender stereotypes and that stigma that, I need to be strong. I shouldn't be opening up about this. I need to keep this to myself because I need to provide. And it just goes back to what we all know, really, that, those kind of gender stereotypes, they hurt everyone. They hurt women and they hurt men.
Gender politics and the expectation and then the workplace amplifies that in itself, doesn't it? So, but you do look at some of the best leaders or most inspirational people, and they talk like people about people as people. It's not workforce or human resources or God forbid numbers or any of that stuff, in the word employee or staff or whatever. It's just like that, people that we work with. And I think we're getting towards a space where that's being a little bit normalized, and recognizing also, the work through people like Perry Timms, where, actually work should be an energizer for all of us. And we go back to, whether it's our family or our friends or whatever we do in our own personal time, having been energized from the workplace, not going into the workplace energized because we've been with our family. There's, at the end of the day, our battery's completely dead. Should be the other way around, shouldn't it? So
it kind of comes back to what you were saying at the start of our conversation. For some people, being busy, being at work, doing something they're passionate about, being productive, that's a real protective factor for their mental health. And I think for some people, they think, if you're struggling with poor mental health, okay, you need some time out from the workplace. You just need to go home and be by yourself and rest. And actually, no, like for most people, they want to work, they want to be in the workplace. And that's actually really helpful for your mental health.
Structure, I suppose. And
yeah,
focus.
absolutely.
And as long as you are dealing with the root cause of that as well. And it's not just a superficial, I'm just touching on this because I can start to feel the anxiety. You've got to be dealing with the root cause as well, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it's just about tapping into all the protective factors that you can. And yeah, like I said, work can be one of them. Sleep can be one of them. Good exercise, good diet, connection with others is another really important one. And I'm quite interested in the way that the world of work is changing so much. And I mean, even us doing this call, having this conversation, we're doing it remotely. I'm quite interested in the impact of working remotely on your mental health, and what is the impact of that? Is it good for us? Is it detrimental? And again, I think it varies, but there is something missing, isn't there, when you are working from home? Even when you were talking about having a business partner or having someone who notices a change in your behavior, do we have as much opportunity to notice changes in our colleagues when we're working remotely? I'm not sure that we do. And I think we need to make sure that we create those opportunities to check in and to have the opportunity to notice and see if something is not going so well.
Yeah, and for me, that's the beauty of like working with your tribe, the people that you choose to work with, who are your people. And I've certainly found through kind of being a business owner, you get to choose who those people are, compared to when you work for somebody else. You don't get to choose who your boss is or who your team are or who your customers are or any of that stuff. So there's certainly the highs and lows on both sides. And again, it'll be horses for courses, won't it? One thing will be more helpful for other people. The security of employment will be a lot less stressful than setting up your own business. So I think I wish everybody would just take a little bit of time out of their day-to-day lives. Maybe it goes back to the check-in thing that you were talking about earlier. Like, just check in. How are you feeling right now? And if there's stuff going on for you, what's triggering that? I just have a little reflection. What could that be? Who can you talk to about it? What coping strategies can you put in place? Is that medical GP referral? Is that Pilates on a Sunday morning that gives you half an hour out from the kids and the family, just to kind of chill for a bit? So it's just finding your place and your people, which I think really helps, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it's about sort of having almost like a menu of self-care options, and everyone's going to choose the dishes or choose the techniques or strategies that work for them, really.
But not burying it, not being the ostrich burying the head in the sand, because that only works for so long, I guess, doesn't it?
Yeah. And I also think like you were talking about sort of having that time for like introspection and checking in with yourself. But I think that's only part of the story. Like, self-management is so important, but for me and for a lot of my colleagues here at the Mental Health Foundation, it goes hand in hand with peer support. We are social creatures, and we need people around us, like your tribe, like you were saying. We can't do all of the healing work completely on our own. We do need people around us and to be part of a community sort of effort. I think when it comes to our mental health.
And the right people, because actually the wrong people could make it more toxic if we're not careful. So, I think people need to feel empowered that that's a choice that they can make as well. Sometimes we don't realize the choices that we do have, but that's definitely a choice that we've got in our life.
Yeah. And I think psychoeducation courses, they are really empowering. I don't know if you found that yourself, but when you can kind of learn more about I'm saying like your mental illness, maybe you don't even have a mental illness, but if you can learn more about the way the mind works and risk factors, protective factors, and just be really clued up, I think that is really empowering for people to kind of take control and just feel more in control of their own mental health, really.
Have the conversation that perhaps you never really felt comfortable having that conversation before, but actually knowing that there's support out there and courses and other ways to get access to stuff that will work for you in different parts of your life with different people at different times, and all of that is okay as well.
Yeah. And of course, we're both learning professionals, and that's what I always think. There's always more to learn. It's not like anyone knows everything. No one's an expert on mental health. There's always more to learn. There's always a different perspective to take. So I just think it's really healthy to try and educate yourself and try and learn more. and for that to be a continual process.
I totally agree. What a good conversation, eh?
Yeah. I think it's getting to time to wrap up now, actually. But I've really enjoyed speaking with you.
And you, yeah, absolutely.
We'll have to stay in touch. Actually, so I'm working on a course coming up that's about like managing your mental health when you have a long-term physical condition. So I would love to reach out to you and hear a bit more about your experience. That would be really awesome.
Absolutely, more than happy to. Like I said, I'll probably
thanks.
let it all hang out a little bit too much, but it's all with the right intention.
Yeah, absolutely.
Good stuff. Thanks, Rachel.
All right, well, take care.
Take care.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
We think this is a top episode and are sure that you will agree. I love listening back to this one, and I'd forgotten how insightful and informative that this conversation had been. Massive thanks to Erica and Rachel for their time in recording this episode. It was fabulous, and you'll find all their contact details, as well as links to the things that they get mentioned, in the show notes. Next time, we've got a special 2-part episode, and that's coming out next week on the 17th and 18th of October, and it's the menopause one, which we're really looking forward to. Please do make sure to like and subscribe to the podcast, and please do tell your friends. It really does help and make a difference. As always, thanks for listening, and we'll see you again soon.